What is good, people? Welcome to another video on 8 Count. Today's video I'm going to be taking a look at the UFC 276 main card and giving you my picks and predictions. As always, guys, if you do enjoy the video, please leave a like, comment down below, let me know who you think is going to win the main and co-main event, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. Let's get straight into it. What an amazing card, and I think if you're trying to get someone into MMA, as always, this is a perfect card to bring them just into the sport. I think you look at all the fights on the main card, and I do see the majority of these fights playing out on the feet. I think we should start with the main event. Israel Adesanya taking on Jared Cannonier, which is hopefully going to be a striker's delight. I think this fight is going to play out mostly on the feet. I think if you look at both guys, I think Adesanya is so comfortable in the stand-up, and I don't think he's going to be particularly worried about the stand-up game of Jared Cannonier to the point where he's going to have to shoot for a takedown or anything like that. And I think for Jared Cannonier as well, I think he's coming into this fight and he's going to be confident in his ability to find the chin of Adesanya, and when he does, I think he thinks he's got the power to put Izzy out. So I don't think Jared's really going to show much of a grappling game. He hasn't really showed it in his career previously, so I don't think it's going to start in this title fight. I do think it's an interesting one. I think Jared Cannonier is being, heavily overlooked in this fight. He's only a plus 320 underdog, but I do think he has some abilities which make him a bit of a nightmare for Izzy. I think you look at the fact that his only loss in the middleweight division is coming against Rob Whittaker. I think people look at that and look at the fact that Izzy's beaten Rob twice and think that therefore Jared Cannonier is just going to be an easy fight for Izzy. I don't think that. I think styles make fights, and I think if you look at Rob and Jared, I actually think Jared's a better matchup for Izzy. I think in the Rob fight for Jared, I think he had moments of brilliance. Obviously, he did get hurt a couple times in the fight. I think Rob got hurt as well in the fight, but it was a good fight. It wasn't a blowout for Rob. It was a decent victory, though. It was a hard-fought victory. And I think Jared has got this ability in this fight to make it very difficult for Izzy. I do think Izzy's got the footwork, though, which is going to make it extremely difficult for Jared. I think if Izzy wasn't so light on his feet and didn't have such good lateral movement and the ability to reset and find himself back to the center of the octagon, I think it would be a much easier fight for Jared. I think the fact that Izzy is going to be able to do that is going to be able to frustrate Jared Cannonier. I think if you look at how this fight's going to play out, I do think Izzy's going to be on the back foot, but I do think it's going to favour him. I think if you look at his previous fights, you look at the likes of Brunson coming forward, Whittaker coming forward, and these guys are walking onto strikes, and that's what makes Izzy so dangerous, because I think he has this ability to freeze his opponents because they don't want to come forward because they don't want to get counter, and then he's just able to chew them up with the leg kicks and all other sorts of techniques. And I think in this fight, Jared isn't going to hesitate. I think, he's looked at fights in the past and Izzy has been able to, see out a decision or pick his opponent apart and find a finish. And I don't think Jared's going to look at those fights and think he's going to have much of a chance if he just allows Izzy to dictate the range. I think he's going to be pretty active in this fight. I think he's going to be on the front foot the majority of the fight, and I think he's going to be putting a lot of pressure on Izzy. I think it does make it dangerous for Jared, but I think if you look at some of Izzy's fights, the way he leans back with the head, no hands up, it does make him susceptible. But obviously he's got that ability and he's very confident in himself that he's not going to get knocked out and he's not going to get caught. But I do feel like one of these days he is going to get caught, and I think if you look at the sort of fighters that Izzy has fought, and you look at Jared Cannonier and you think about the power and the athleticism that Jared does possess, I think it could happen. I do think it could happen. I think the leg kicks are going to be interesting in this fight because, Izzy chews everyone up with the leg kicks. He's brilliant at them. His leg kick defense as well is excellent. I think you look at the Rob Whittaker fight and the way he was able to, I think it was the first one, where he was able to bring the lead leg back and then counter with a high kick straight off it was amazing. But I do think Jared could have some success as well with the leg kicks. I think, the sort of fighter that he is, obviously coming down from heavyweight and light heavyweight now to this middleweight frame, You know, he's an absolutely gigantic middleweight, a lot of power. And he's shown that with his leg kicks. He's given multiple guys problems with them. I think he gave Rob a couple problems with the leg kicks. Obviously, he finished Anderson Silva with a leg kick. And I do think that Izzy will have to be careful in this fight. I think that is another strategy that Jared could potentially use to, you know, find himself in a position to finish Adesanya. I do think the leg kicks are going to be important on both sides, and I think Izzy's going to probably not throw as many leg kicks in this fight as he has previously, because I do think Jared's going to try and make Izzy work at a pace and make Izzy constantly be moving. So I don't think he's going to be set enough to really throw those leg kicks. And like I said, I do think Jared is being overlooked in this fight. I think he's a live dog. I think if I was to pick on my head, I do think that the footwork of Adesanya, you know, is going to cause a lot of problems. I don't know how Jared's going to be able to react to that on the front foot, how he's going to, you know, be able to keep his head. Is he going to get frustrated? Stuff like that. So yeah, if I was to pick this fight, I'd probably go with an Adesanya decision. I'm not sure he's got what it takes to finish Jared early. Depending on how the fight plays out, I could see Jared potentially, you know, getting tired. We haven't really seen him in a 5-round main event, and I think that could cause problems for him as well. But I'm not going to pick with my head. I'm going to pick with my heart. I feel like Jared Cannonier is going to be the new middleweight champion. I just have this feeling. It's not based off facts necessarily. It's based off gut, and I just have a feeling that he's going to clip Adesanya and hurt him badly. So I'm going to go with a Jared Cannonier second round finish, and we'll have Anu in the main event. Takes us on to the co-main, which is so worthy of being a main event on any numbered UFC card, because of how important this fight is, for one, and how interesting the matchup is. We've seen 2 fights already between Volk and Max, and you know, they both played out very differently. Like I've said in the past, I think I've done a preview for this fight before, but the fight fell off, and I scored the first fight for Volk pretty handily. I thought the second fight was close, but I did give it to Max. I think I scored it 3-2. I think this fight is super interesting because of what's happened since the second fight. Obviously, you look at what sort of styles took place in those fights. We saw a regular sort of Max Holloway in the first fight, and he got pieced up with the leg kicks. I think in the second fight he adjusted really well to that, but I think Volkanovski was able to switch to the wrestling late on too. I think that's probably what maybe would have gotten the decision on the cards, but like I said, I thought Max won. Since that, both guys have fought twice, which is a bit uncommon, I'd say, for both. I think both fighters prefer to be quite active, but you know, both guys only be able to fight twice in 2 years, so that's not too great on either side. I think if you look at Volk's fights, you know, Brian Ortega and the Korean Zombie, you know, he's really put a beating on both of those guys. Yes, in the Ortega fight, he got caught, but I think he showed the heart of a champion to really get out of both submission attempts from Brian Ortega. And in the Korean Zombie fight, it just wasn't competitive at all. He was the faster man, he was the more skilled man, and he had the better game plan on the night. He pieced up the Korean Zombie and made it look easy. I think that's good sort of fights for him to be coming in from. However, I'm not sure if they are the same competitive matchups that Max has had. I think Keita is still a very underrated fighter in some senses, and Max put an absolute whooping on him, one of the most historical beatdowns I think in UFC history, just because of the way it played out, and you know, people calling for it to be stopped. And then he had the Yair Rodriguez fight. For me, I don't think Max was on his A game in that fight, and I think Yair had a lot of success. Obviously, he's got the fight coming up with Brian Ortega, which will be an amazing fight. But for me, I do think, you know, it did make me think about, is Max still the same guy? The cut to 145 is obviously hard for him. You know, he's taken a lot of damage in his career, which isn't really spoken about, I guess, so much on the UFC commentary side anyway. And I do worry for him in this fight. I think that Volkanovski is probably not only the better fighter, but I think he's the smarter fighter. I think he's going to be able to find, I don't know why I sound like a farmer, but he's the better fighter. And in my opinion anyway. I think he's going to be able to have multiple game plans depending on what Max is doing. And I think his well-roundedness, which I guess you could say Max is heavily underrated when it comes to that. Obviously, his ground game and wrestling is super underrated. But I do think the ability for Volk to kind of set the pace is what's going to happen. I think he's got an ability to potentially back up Max in this fight. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he is probably going to play off the back foot. He's going to be able to freeze Max at times, which I think is going to play a big factor because I think Max loves a high output, and I don't think he can do that against Volkanovski without being punished at times. I'm going to go with Volk. I just think he's too good. I think he's in his prime right now. I don't think the cut for 145 is the best move for Max Holloway. And coming off the Yair Rodriguez fight, I'm not too confident in his abilities. However, I wouldn't be shocked if he won this fight. I think he's an amazing fighter, and he's got some absolutely phenomenal output and techniques, and I know he can cause Volk problems, but I just don't see it happening. That moves us on to the third fight on the main card, Sean Strickland against Alex Pereira. This fight's hard for me to pick as well. I think if this was a kickboxing fight, it'd be no doubt that Alex Pereira is going to get the win. In terms of his MMA career, he's still quite early into it. I remember seeing him in Aleph A, is it? Aleph C, maybe? I can't remember the organisation. I think it was a fight on Fight Pass where he knocked the guy out of a left hook and, hurt the guy bad. I think in the UFC he's looked good. Obviously, 2 or 3 victories, is it now? I think at times that people have been able to give him problems, especially with the first fight he had with the wrestling. I don't think Sean Strickland's going to do that, but I do think Sean Strickland's going to be the one guy who's going to give Pereira a lot of problems on the feet. I think the fact that Sean Strickland is just fucking nuts is going to play into his favour here. I think I could see him getting some control time against the fence, maybe using the clinch to just wear on Pereira. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this fight looks if it makes it to the third round. I think Sean Strickland's going to have a lot of success in this fight. I think his striking is really good, but I just think it looks a bit awkward on the eye at times. Obviously, I think his last fight, he was superb. Didn't get the finish, and I think he was disappointed in himself, but I did think he put on a really good performance. I think Sean Strickland's going to get the win here. He's an underdog, which is surprising because he's established himself in the past 2 years in this middleweight division really well. Before that, he's a veteran of the game, basically. Pereira's the new dog on the block. I don't even think that's I think that's the wrong phrase, but well, the new kid on the block, isn't it? Yeah. But Pereira, for me, he's not even a ranked fighter at the moment. You look at the competition he has faced in MMA, you can't compare that to the level of fighter that Sean Strickland has faced. I think when it comes to the striking, obviously he's got an extreme amount of fights, but I just see Strickland being able to make this fight dirty. I think he's going to get in the face of Pereira. I think he's going to try and take that left hook away early on. I think he's got to be careful of the kicks and some of the flashy stuff, flying knees. But I'm going to pick Sean Strickland. If he isn't able to dictate the pace of this fight, I think it's going to be bad news for Sean. But I'm going to go with Sean Strickland. I think he's going to get a decision victory here, maybe a third round finish. We'll have to wait and see, but I think it's a very interesting matchup, and I'm really shocked that Strickland is the underdog. Let me know what you think about that fight in the comment down below if you haven't made it this far, because I do think it's a rather interesting one. We'll move on to the second fight on the main card, Pedro Munoz against Sean OMalley. I think this is an interesting fight. I think ever since the Chito Vera fight, there's a sort of stigma about Sean OMalley. He's a quitter when the going gets tough. That he's fragile. I'm not sure if these things are true. I do think it was a really good use of the leg kick, and if you throw it in the right spot, you're going to get the right outcome. And I felt Sean did a good job on the feet. even after that, but got caught, and it is what it is. Since then, he's put on some really fun performances, whether it be against Chris Moutinho or Paiva, I think it was, and now it's really set him up to go into the rankings and have a proper shot to make it to the top of the division. I think Pedro Munoz is the sort of perfect opponent for that. I think if you look at what sort of weaknesses we assume OMalley has, that's one of Munoz's strengths. I think some of Munoz's weaknesses are counterbalanced by Sean O'Malley's strengths. So we'll talk about the leg kicks. I think Pedro Munoz is one of the best leg kickers in MMA. I think if you look at, was it the second or the third? I'm not sure how many fights they've had, but Jimmy Rivera fight, the most recent one, he chewed up Jimmy Rivera bad. I do think, though, that it's an overestimation, I guess you could say, of, you know, him being fragile in Sean O'Malley and to the leg kicks and things like that, because I think he's going to have a lot of success in this fight. I think the fact that, you know, Pedro Munoz is a good striker. I don't think he's as fluid as striker as Sean O'Malley. I think Sean O'Malley's going to have a lot of success with footwork. I think the fact that, you know, Pedro Munoz is more of an old-fashioned sort of fighter, very flat-footed at times. I think it's going to, you know, give O'Malley chances. I do find it interesting if this fight goes to the ground. We know Munoz is a guillotine master and a really good jiu-jitsu practitioner. Sean O'Malley, on the other hand, is super underrated in his ground game. I can't remember what the tournament was called, but it was that like team grappling sort of event on Fight Pass a couple of years back when Sean O'Malley got a couple of submissions, I think, on there, and that was really fun, and it was good to see him in that sort of way and that sort of environment. I do think if it goes to a grappling scenario in this fight, Pedro Munoz is probably going to have the upper hand. I think his wrestling's probably on a different level to Sean O'Malley's. I think you look back to early Sean O'Malley days, the one guy had a lot of takedown success against him. I can't remember his name. But yeah, for me, I think Sean O'Malley, he's got the range. I think he's going to cause a lot of problems with his footwork, and I think he's going to piece Pedro up early. And it's going to, you know, depend on what happens in those later rounds. I think you look earlier in O'Malley's career, you know, he was struggling a little bit with the gas tank. Since then, he's been able to fight at his sort of pace and not really struggle as much. But I wonder if the forward pressure of Pedro Munoz could potentially cause him problems there. I am going to pick Sean O'Malley. I'm going to go with a Sean O'Malley decision. You know, for me, I do think Pedro Munoz is too tough. I think there will be a chance for a finish because of, you know, you look at what Aldo did to Munoz because of the way he fought Aldo. Very flat-footed, didn't really create too many angles and stuff like that. I think Sean O'Malley is going to, you know, potentially going to have a chance to finish the fight, but I don't see it happening. I think Pedro Munoz is too tough, too wily of a veteran, and I think this is going to be probably one of the fights of the night. I do think it's going to be a very high-paced striking affair, and hopefully we do see a little bit of grappling, because I do think it'd be interesting to see what happens if Sean O'Malley's on his back against the likes of someone like Pedro Munoz. That would be super interesting. The first fight on the main card, though, guys, is Robbie Lawler taking on Brian Barberina. I think this is a fight in which it's a great sort of fight to open up the main card for this sort of event, because it's going to be super fucking sloppy. And if you like that, you're going to love this fight, because I think both guys are probably going to get hurt. I think both guys are probably going to look a bit out of sorts, I guess you could say. I think there's going to be a lot of swinging wildly. I don't really see Robbie going for a takedown. I think you could potentially see Brian going for one. But I do worry for Robbie. I think, you know, in his last fight against Nick Diaz, he got the win, but Nick Diaz looked like Chuck Liddell versus Tito Free, sort of levels of bad. And for me, I didn't think Robbie Lawler looked that great either. You know, before that, couple of bad sort of performances from him. You know, he's definitely in the twilight of his career. And I think Brian is definitely a fighter who gets overlooked at times. I think, yes, his skill set isn't the most dynamic or advanced in the UFC, but what he does have is a really good work ethic. You know, he fights at a high pace. and he's always putting in a show. You know, he's not rarely in a boring fight, and I do think he's gonna get the win here. I'd love to see Robbie win it, but Brian as well, man. He seems like a super nice guy. He had his family in the fight after the last one. Seemed like it was going to be his last fight, but obviously the UFC did get him back. So it's good to see. I'm going to go with Brian. I'm going to go with Brian to get a finish here in the second round. Actually, I can't do that. I'm going to go with Brian to get a decision victory. I just think maybe the pace at times is going to be too much for Robbie. But I do see Brian getting clipped maybe early on in the first round. We'll have to wait and see. Also on the card, we got a stacked prelim card. Like I've said in another video, Jim Miller versus Donald Cerrone. I'm going to go... Oh, shit, it's Jim Miller versus Donald Cerrone now. I thought it was still Joe Lozon. Jim Miller versus Donald Cerrone is a hell of a fight when you think about it. On the feet, I think Jim Miller is going to have similar sort of opportunities, which I thought Joe Lozon was going to have with the hands. I think Jim Miller's also a very underrated striker. And I think on the ground, this one could be super interesting as well. I won't give you my pick for that, but that's a super good fight. And, you know, the prelims are stacked from start to finish, really. I'm really looking forward to this fight card. I hope you guys are as well. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like, comment down below, let me know your picks for the main card, most importantly the co-main and main event. Some really interesting fights on this card, and I think it's going to be an absolute banger, to be honest. As always, guys, if you did enjoy the video, please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. And I'll probably see you now on Monday or Tuesday with my reaction to this card. Obviously, we've got Joe Joyce fighting as well on the weekend. Depending on how the fight goes, I might do a reaction to that, but we'll have to wait and see. So I'll see you Monday, and peace out. Take care of yourself, and have a good weekend. I'll see you soon.